The Insurance Brokers Podcast is brought to you by Sarah Myerscough of Boston Tullis.
Welcome to the Insurance Brokers Podcast with your host, Sarah Myerscough. This business podcast is for ambitious brokers determined to grow their business. Our guests are highly experienced industry experts and innovators. This is the place to leverage their success, learn how to break through barriers to growth, and discover a community of support and ideas whilst growing your business.
Good morning, Adrian. Thank you so much for joining me again on the Insurance Brokers Podcast. It's great to have you here.
Good morning, Sarah. Good to see you.
Absolutely. So we did a podcast about 6 weeks ago now, I think, and we were talking specifically around this generalist, specialist broker sort of proposition. And one of the things that you guys were doing at the time was some market research in this topic. And I know that you've had the results back, and this is what we're going to have a conversation about today. So I wonder if you want to give a bit more of an intro as to where you've got to with this topic, and then we can dive into some of the detail.
Yeah, of course, Sarah, I can. So the timing of the podcast last time was fantastic. So we had the research out in the field at that time. We were trying to get responses back. And, you know, that podcast gave us a real opportunity to promote it a little bit wider than we were already doing at that point. So we were in the market with this piece of research sort of April, May. And the reason for doing it, there's a big link here to our rebrand project, and I can't unfortunately put up anything in the background with my branding, but if I could, I would. A big part of the theme of our rebrand is about Ecclesiastical as a specialist insurer, because that is ultimately what we are. So we were then interested to explore more about the broker market and what the drivers for specialism have been with brokers. Why have they specialised? Is specialism important? What is important if they do see it as important? And that's basically what the research was all about.
I think one of the things we talked about last time, again, which I picked up a few things in the results that I've had a look at, is the definition of specialism. And actually it's quite broad when we talked about it last time, not just as being a particular industry, but a particular client, a particular product, a particular geographical location. So we are talking about all kinds of sort of ways in which you differentiate as being an expert in one particular area, aren't we?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. So over half of the brokers that we surveyed recognise themselves as being specialist. That's quite a lot, really. And what I should also say is that since we've had the research that we're talking about today, we've been working through a series of broker roundtables with more intimate discussions with small groups of brokers, and we're sort of halfway through that process. And this is one of the things that we've been talking about there as well. Is okay, what does specialism mean to you? And often we've got a very mixed group. So you can imagine we did a roundtable with schemes brokers, who almost by default and by definition are specialists. That is what they do. And they all strongly really recognised everything. Now, the other roundtables that we're doing tend to be more mixed, and there'll be a mixture of provincial and super regional and national brokers, often who have got some specialism or some specialist business unit, but might not necessarily be in specialists in totality. Yet they can still recognise that they are specialists, but they might describe it in a different way. And as you said, I think is that because they see themselves strongly as their specialism is they are a community broker and that is what they do and they don't step outside of that, or is their specialism that they are the broker to the widget manufacturers and that's all they do and they don't step outside of that. And then I think the interesting conversation after that is, okay, so how deep does that specialism need to go? Because if it's a very sort of thin veneer, it gets picked away very quickly, and really there's not a lot of substance. And then I think that's led us in, and through the research, actually, the researchers said, spending time in the end customer's environment, being embedded in the customer's world, understanding their issues, their concerns, what's going on in their environment is really, really important. And that's what makes, I think, all of the brokers who've taken part in the survey and the brokers that we're talking to through the round tables, that's what makes them specialists. They invest time and energy, they see the importance of that. And the source of that specialism can come from different places.
What I think is interesting through the insights that you've shared is this personal affinity to the specialism. So some of the questions that you've asked around is sort of, how did you come to be a specialist in this area? And it comes out quite strongly that there's a personal interest or something you're particularly good at, or a background in something not insurance, which has bridged that gap. I think that's quite an interesting proposition.
Yeah, I think personal interest comes through quite strongly. I think the other thing, I can think of one conversation with one broker who said, "Well, look, actually, it's where my career started. I started my career, and then I got interested in because we were insuring this type of business, and it's gone from there." So, is that personal interest? Yeah, I think it is. It's not not in the same way as it's a hobby or a passion outside of business, but within business, recognizing that commonality and then becoming interested in it, and taking the time and effort to be interested, and find out more.
I'm reading a book at the moment called The Future of Insurance by Brian Falchuk, and it's only just come out. It's a new book to the market. He's done quite an interesting thing. He's done case studies of 7 startups and done a bit of a comparison, sort of MGA and carrier startups, and done a bit of a comparison with composites. And one of the case studies is an American company called Thimble Insurance. I don't know if you know it, but the founder of Thimble Insurance was not an insurance expert. He was he'd set up and run businesses around transport, so e-courier, Halo, taxi firms, trying to take on Uber and that kind of stuff. But one of the things that he came out of these businesses with was a strong knowledge of the gig economy. When he went back to America, he got interested in drones and realized that actually drone insurance was not a thing back then, and the only alternative was aviation insurance. So that's how he ended up on his journey. I found that really interesting. No insurance connections, no knowledge of insurance, but a really strong understanding that the product there was no product that was fit for purpose for this group of people. I find that really interesting. And then it goes through his journey about what the really important aspects of setting up his business were, of which compliance and capacity were 2. But I think it's really interesting. And I had a conversation with Gary Williamson a while ago when he was at South Essex, and he was talking about their equestrian facility came from horse people. They real genuine interest, and you build out from there. So I think the personal interest side is really interesting.
I think you would recognise that when we deal with brokers, especially. And I am going to go back to that default of schemes, but there's we've got plenty of fantastic scheme brokers that we deal with who've got fantastic schemes that link back to a personal interest. Somewhere in there, there'll be something that has driven that because of that. But I think the only thing I'd say under this sort of topic of specialism is, let's not pigeonhole it to be just that. It can be broader than that, I think. And I think when over half of the brokers responding to our survey said they recognise themselves as specialists, that's because there is a breadth in how they kind of define that. But what they all do, and the really important thing, is that spending time in the customer's environment, whatever that means, whether that's in that really, really niche area or whether that's in the broader sort of communities piece. You can still be a specialist in your community, seen as the specialist, and you spend time and embed yourself in that community.
And I like what you said earlier about the depth of speciality. There was one insight that I picked up, which was, what type of specialist business do you place? And the answer, 14% said all types, So I was really interested in that. Again, not being facetious, because I absolutely understand there are brokers that are specialists in lots of different areas because they've got specialist teams. But I think it must be really interesting for you to be unpicking that kind of insight through your broker briefings.
Yeah, and it's interesting the way the broker briefings are going in sort of different directions as well. So the research is just the stimulus for the conversation really, and it's been interesting where the direction, and each one so far has gone in something of a different direction, which is really good for us, and fantastic insight for us in terms of how brokers see the market. Their view of the importance of specialist insurers, because let's cut to it. Why are we doing it? Well, we've got a vested interest here as a specialist insurer. How important is that? And that comes through really strongly. Yeah, actually, placing business with a specialist insurer is really important. And 84% of brokers when asked said that would be their preference, is to work with specialists. So that's great validation for us. But it's how do we then hook into that as an opportunity, and also to support those brokers in growing their businesses.
One of the things that interested me on what you're saying there is this idea, and it does come through in some of the research, this idea that being a specialist makes you more acquirable. If your succession planning is ultimately to sell. And I did a podcast. One of the early podcasts I did one with Tim Johnson and one with Peter Blanc, both obviously who are heavy in the consolidation market. And both of them made a point of saying when they are looking at businesses, they are looking at having a business that has a specialism in something, doesn't matter what, just something. And the very first podcast I did was with Peter Cullum, and he said, in whatever industry you're in, whatever you're doing, be top 3 in something. And that's sort of a further validation for the results that are coming out of this, how important that is. And I think from a marketing and sales perspective, it comes down to focus. Once you've got a specialism, you've got a real laser sharp focus as to where your sales resource is putting its time, where your marketing resource is putting its time, where your business development and strategic decisions are headed. So I think it's really important on a number of different levels.
I think it's about clear proposition, isn't it? I think businesses that specialize have got a clear market proposition. And one reason, amongst those reasons why I think they're attractive from an investment position or an acquisition position is because they have a proposition, they have a market, so they have a definable market in which they can grow, assuming there's headroom for them to grow. And invariably they have a place. So they have something, that a brand or something, a position in that market that you can build on. And they've all got financial value. If you just say, hey, look, I'm great, I'm a generalist, I do all sorts of things, what's my proposition? I'm not so sure. How investable, therefore, am I as a business? Probably not as investable as I would be if I was a specialist. So I think that's true. And I linked to that the other bit that I thought was really interesting, and was about employee development and engagement as well. So whilst on one side the research says we're more investable, which I think we're both agreeing, it also said it also helps us attract, develop, and engage our employees as well. Same thing though, isn't it? At the core, it's because actually I really like that this business is a business that's got a really clear proposition, a really clear purpose, and depending on what it is, it's something I'm really interested in that. So it might be about it might be about charity, it might be about classic cars, it might be about musical instruments, it might be about, gosh, there's so many things. Or as we were saying earlier, it might be because actually this community thing is really important to me, and being able to position myself as a professional advisor in this particular community, that attracts me as a specialist. So I think a lot of it does link back to having that really clear and identifiable proposition.
I'm going to pick up on something you said there, and it's a question. I'm going to pick up on something you said there, and it's a question. I've got a question for you. One of the pieces of education, training, and support that we do with some of our clients is around this idea that as an insurance advisor, you're actually a business advisor. So you should be able to advise on a number of different things that play into an insurance product, but also either solve other business issues or at least be able to signpost to partners, you know, these guys can help with your wealth management, these guys can help with your risk management, etc. So this idea, and I love this quote, we're no longer a provider of solutions, but a diagnoser of issues and a solver of solutions. I've messed that up, but essentially that's the idea. So actually, one of the things we're talking about is getting in your client's market and understanding business, their industry, that, you know, what's coming in, the industry future trends, what's happening in this particular business. Are they trying to innovate different products? So that, you know, all of this kind of stuff, right? One of the insights that came out of your survey is sort of suggests that additional value added services is a lower priority than some of the other things. And I'd really like your input on that.
Yeah. So again, you know, you get you do these things, don't you? You get the survey and you get the survey results and you look at it, and there will always be something that you think that doesn't quite fit with conversations that we typically have. And that finding from the research doesn't quite fit. It doesn't really fit with the discussions we've been having with brokers in the roundtable environments either, who I think all recognise that actually being able to be that trusted advisor, being able to have insight across the sector which their client is actually operating in adds real value and does differentiate them. You know, increasingly we all, whether we're insurers or we're brokers, we want to move away from just selling product. You know, that's certainly been the journey that we've been on for quite some time, is to, as a specialist, to generate insight about the areas that we operate in, enable us to have underwriters who understand the issues that the ultimate end client is facing, share that and work with that with our broker partners so that they can have those same conversations and lead the client to an insurance solution, but not lead with an insurance solution. Because if you lead with an insurance solution, you're just selling product. If you lead to, you're offering advice, you're demonstrating understanding of the sector which your client operates in. So yeah, we were a little surprised by that piece that came out in the research, and it's one thing that again has been, I think, in all of the roundtables so far we've talked about, and there's a far greater, I think, swell of opinion towards that being an advisor and being embedded in the sector and understanding the issues and being happy to introduce from outside of just insurance to be seen to add value.
I think that's really, really interesting. So some of the work we're doing at the moment is with one of the larger brokers that has a lot of different areas for, you know, risk management, all sorts of value add services. And the work that we're doing is around how we can get new from existing and how we can get the account directors to actually introduce or to understand that actually this product might be interesting, this product might be interesting. And the work we're doing is around knowledge of the account director, the sort of the process involved around it, and then how to sort of maximize and coach people to do this kind of stuff. So it's really interesting. The aim is there, and I can see in lots of the conversations, and you've just validated that in terms of the conversations you're having. And again, it's how deep does that go? How embedded is that? And how do we build on that to make it instinctive rather than I know this is what I should be doing? Because that's where I think a lot of people find things a bit difficult, because I know insurance. And actually, I'm a little bit nervous about advising on this or advising on that. I don't know where to go to get the information. I haven't, that kind of thing is some of the work that we do, which I'm finding really interesting.
And also, I think, you know, I think the other thing, it's not easy. That's one thing I would say. It's not easy. We've got the scars to prove that it's not easy because, as I say, from us as a business, then we've been on this journey about trying to change the narrative and trying to change the dialogue, to talk about, to use insight, to talk about the issues in the specialist sectors, and to lead brokers and help brokers lead customers, lead them to insurance as a solution. Now that's breaking all sorts of things that we've done for years. You know, we've all been brought up, especially if you're of a certain age, unfortunately, selling products on features and benefits. It's boring, it's dull, it doesn't, you know, everybody can do that. There's no differentiation, and it doesn't demonstrate that you understand the issues of your client. But unfortunately, it's where we all go because we're confident in that and doing it in a different way. So, you know, if I take our business development team, they've been on this journey about, leading to the product and using insight and being able to talk about all the insight that we produce. In the round tables, we've talked to brokers about, look, we have got loads of insight. Our challenge is getting you guys to use it with customers. But we have a wealth of insight that we guarantee it will open doors for you. We guarantee you will sell business if you use it. But it's breaking habit, isn't it? And I think that is one of the challenges. When you talk to, and in the research here, when you talk to brokers who are really clearly identified as specialists, you know, they have a deep specialism in a particular area, they don't need to be led to that because that's what they do. That is absolutely what they do. And they don't need to be convinced about the value of working with different advisors or solving other problems, because that's what they do. So I think it's how deep is that specialism, and then how comfortable are you with the subject matter? And if you see yourself as selling product, then you're not really a specialist anyway.
And that comes back to a value proposition
It does.
that is the core of every decision that is made. And I think it is so interesting. Adrian, I have really enjoyed having this conversation with you this morning. The insights are, like you say, a really good foundation to build on in the conversations that you are having in your broker briefings and roundtables. So I'm really grateful that you've been able to share that with us. And if anybody listening wants to chip in on this conversation or contact Adrian or myself with any additional insights, thoughts, etc., then please do. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much for your time, Adrian.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you have enjoyed what you have heard, have any questions or feedback, please leave us a review and we will be sure to get back to you. If you would like further information on how Boston Tullis Group can support your business, or if you would like to join us on an episode, please do not hesitate to contact us.